Okay, I think we're at time now, so we'll start. So thanks very much for joining us today. We're thrilled to be able to welcome you to Responsible Disruption and our 10th Innovation Table Zoomcast. My name is James Gamage and I'm the Director of Innovation and the Social Impact Lab at the United Way of Calgary area.
My name is Monique Blau and I'm the Director of Strategy and Design in the lab and at J5, a Calgary-based innovation design firm, and we are your host for Responsible Disruption. We're delighted to welcome our guests as we explore pandemic, what now, and listening to your customer. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are currently gathered on land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River. The traditional Blackfoot name of this place is Mokintis, which we now call the city of Calgary. This is traditional land of the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as Treaty 7 territory, which includes Kainai, Siksika, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda nations. We would also like to recognize the Métis people and the Inuit people who have made their home here in Calgary. With the sad events that have been unfolding in our world in the last couple weeks, we cannot remain silent. We stand against racism and intolerance in any form. We believe everyone deserves to live in equitable communities that are built on inclusion, diversity, understanding, and tolerance. At the Social Impact Lab, we strive to put people first, to create a diverse and inclusive culture where everyone feels safe and valued. We have a few housekeeping items to cover for today. We are recording the session, so if you want to share it with your colleagues or friends, we'll be emailing you a follow-up link in the next few days. The recording is also available on our YouTube channel, and you can follow us there. Our next Responsible Disruption episode is scheduled for June 24th, and it will be around art during a crisis and recovery. For our agenda today, we have our introductions. We'll be moving to our innovation table conversations, of course, audience questions, and our close. Of course, we want this session to be interactive, so please, if you have a question along the way, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and we'll be collecting those throughout our Zoomcast.
So what are we here to talk about today? So our social systems are being disrupted and there is demand for new ideas, solutions, products and services. This demand for support continues to outpace the supply of funding. We in the Social Impact Lab, which is a partnership between J5 and the United Way of Calgary area, are responding to this disruption by investing in innovation, which we are calling Responsible Disruption, ensuring that any change that results is considered and fair to Calgarians and communities. Our Responsible Disruption Zoomcasts are a series of discussions with leading players about disruption in their fields. As the lockdown restrictions are gradually eased in Alberta, everyone is feeling their way towards recovery. In the United Way of Calgary area, we are being careful and considered in our response. And like all organizations, we are adjusting to a world with new regulations and new customers and new customer and employee expectations. There are rules and regulations to be followed around social distancing and personal protective equipment, but a truly customer-centered approach starts from a place of kindness and understanding to build processes and methods of working that respond to customer and employee concerns. Today on our Zoomcast, we're speaking to two local business people about how they are approaching the recovery. How did they respond to the lockdown in their organizations? What comes next? And how are they keeping the customer and employer at the center of their rebuild? So let me introduce our guests. I'm delighted to welcome, firstly, Jeff Jamieson. So Jeff is the co-owner of Donna Mac Restaurant, Proof Cocktail Bar, and Vine Arts Wine and Spirits. He's an avid puzzler and reader and a recovering workaholic. And I'd like to also introduce you to Bernadette Kirk. So Bernadette is the General Manager of Integrated Operations Center for the Calgary Airport Authority, responsible for delivering 24/7 operations for one of Canada's busiest airports. An aviation enthusiast, her career has spanned 15 years in airport operations. Bernadette has had the opportunity to participate in several significant projects, including leading the operational readiness and transition team for YYC Calgary International Airport's new international terminal building, providing guidance on the design and delivery of a new security screening point for connecting passengers, and initiating and delivering the airport's integrated operations centre. When not playing airport, Bernadette is a motorcycle enthusiast who enjoys tinkering with her bike and hitting the highway for extended trips. At home, she enjoys spending time outside with her husband and 2 Boston Terriers. So welcome to you both. So before we start, I just want to prompt the audience to make this session as interactive as possible. You know, we like asking questions, but we're also interested in answering the audience questions as well if they come through. So please use the Q&A button on your Zoom desktop to ask questions, and we'll pass those on to Bernadette and Jeff. So the questions themselves. So I'm going to kick off with you, Jeff. So we have some big fans of your work at the Social Impact Lab. I know Monique and our colleague Jackie have taken advantage of your cocktail kits and curbside pickup. But I'd like to ask you about how your businesses, Proof, Fine Arts and Donna Restaurant, responded to the lockdown these past 2 months. You know, what have you done as a local Calgary business to respond, and how have others reacted?
Yeah, well, good question. There's a bit of difference across the businesses. There are 3 different types of businesses, although 2 are hospitality. They're kind of in different segments of hospitality. With Vine Arts, it was, I guess, discovered early on that retail liquor was going to be considered an essential service, or at least allowed to stay open throughout the closure. So the changes that took place at Vine Arts from, I guess, an operational point of view were just around the protocols set out by AHS in the province and the feds with regards to safety protocols. And I mean, they were well distributed and made very clear. So we just had to kind of make an operational reaction with regards to that business and kind of tweak a few things, reduce the amount of people coming into the space. But from an operational point of view, you know, truly not much was required in a kind of a way that would cause disruption to the business. It was a couple of meetings and getting feelings from our staff and kind of moving forward with those kinds of restrictions. The restaurants, the bar and the restaurant were quite a bit more difficult. We did have to close, obviously, early on. During the closure, I guess if there's an advantage to closing, it gave myself and our management teams a lot of time to discuss, you know, what was going to happen as we began to kind of come back out of this and reopen. There was a lot. We didn't lose any staff off of the wine store initially, but obviously we had to temporarily lay off quite a bit of staff with the businesses that were involved in hospitality. In fact, for I guess about 3.5 weeks, we were a company of 1. This guy, at least I was free, but we unfortunately had to temporarily lay off everybody, and that had to be done rather rapidly. We had to do it. I think we made the right call in how we did it. It was we were unsure about it initially. We thought we were doing the right thing for the staff, and it turned out that was the case given the federal government's stepping in with the subsidies. So it ended up being the right thing, I think, for the staff, allowing them to at least collect a nominal amount of money while this was happening. But it was a tough decision as well. So those were kind of like the first stage things that changed. Obviously, as time moved on, we made some changes to the business that were you know, more impactful to the business side of the business as opposed to the operational side of the business. Do you want to hear about those?
Yeah, well, I was. Are you going to talk about the cocktail kits? I'm interested about what sparked the idea of the cocktail kits and the like that you sold out of Proof.
Yeah, so that was we made changes in all the businesses. The cocktail kits in Proof were a discussion between my business partner Jesse Willis at Vine Arts, and we were going to do cocktail kits through Vine Arts, which we did do. Once the province opened up Class E licenses to be allowed to, or sorry, A licenses to be allowed to sell liquor, closed liquor, that was a pretty easy decision for us at Proof. I'd love to take all the credit for it, but we can't. We pay attention to our colleagues all over the world. The first evidence that we saw of something like that was out of Australia, a couple cocktail bars we follow there. And the first Canadian one that I recognized was actually Atwater Cocktail Club in Montreal. So it looked like a very smart idea. And we jumped on board instantly. I think that from the moment that I said, I think we should be doing something like this, Aaron Miller and Reese Southern, my GM and bar manager, we had them on the website in 4 days. So, that having good people around makes that transition rather rapid. With Vine Arts, we transitioned into a delivery service, which was on our plans for 2020 anyways, but it was certainly expedited by the pandemic. So we knew that online was something we were lacking. We've always focused on an in-store shopping experience at Vine Arts. It's kind of where we've carved out our niche market. We feel that people still want to touch and feel and have interaction with somebody when they're discussing something, especially like wine, which they may not be as versed in as we are. So we want to take that pretension away. The best way to do that is to make people comfortable in the space. But we knew that we were missing an opportunity with online and really focused on 2020 being the year to do that. As soon as the shutdowns occurred, obviously demand skyrocketed and we instantly were like, okay, we're going to deliver. And I was delivering in my truck for the first 3 weeks while we scrambled to get a delivery vehicle and the whole 9 yards. But what's come out of this is we've really kicked up the timeline on our website, which should launch right away, which will give a much better, more interactive shopping experience for our guests. And then you've got Donna Mac, which we actually transitioned the business. We went from a kind of upper casual to a casual delivery takeout concept right off the bat, and it's influenced us. The response that we've gotten, we've had a rather lukewarm response to the restaurant, but the response that we've gotten to this it's taken us in a completely other direction. So we are going to be opening Donna Mac probably later than most places in July, but with a brand new look on the space, the menu, the service style. We're casualizing the heck out of it. And trying to bring that down. So all three businesses have changed in a drastic way, while still being the businesses that I guess Calgarians expect of them.
So in those changes, I mean, as you say, that they've changed the business model quite significantly in all three businesses. Do you think you're accessing different customers with this offering, or are they your old loyal customers who are just continuing to purchase from you?
Right. So a bit of both. We get the sense, and I don't have data, we get the sense with Vine Arts that the increase in our sales there was due a lot to people being able to access us who had moved maybe out of the neighborhood in the 8 years that we've been there. We now were delivering, so we gave access to those people who love to come visit us maybe once a month or once every couple months, or if they were downtown. We were delivering to them on a weekly basis. They had the avenue to support us. So I think it was older customers in some cases. There was a push for support local, which I think introduced us to some new customers in that business as well. With Proof, I think it was a lot of loyal customers. I was doing the delivering, and I was finding that a lot of people in the outskirts of town were ordering our cocktail kits. People who don't get an opportunity to come to the bar very often, but maybe had been once or twice and loved it, but wanted that experience at home. Maybe they've got kids, or there's a million reasons why they can't get out of the house, and one of them now being pandemic. So they decided to bring us to them, which was, I think we did see some customers who would maybe not have used us as much doing that. And I will mention, I guess a little bit out of marketing, but I just yesterday released a canned cocktail that we did in partnership with Confluence that kind of blew up. That particular strategy, I think, is going to be the most long-lasting, and it's actually going to be, we hope, a secondary business to Proof, which should be a secondary revenue stream, which will ultimately go on past this. I am not going to be able to sell cocktail boxes. Well, as a retailer, I hope that they pull back the ability for restaurants to sell full bottles, because I'm also a retailer. So I doubt that I'll be able to sell those forever, but the canned cocktails I can. It's a partnership with a distillery, Confluence, and we'll be able to do those forever. Donna Mac, I think a whole new customer base. We did really focus hard on, we knew we may lose some people, but frankly, those people didn't number enough people for me to worry about losing them if replacing them with many, many more. So, and I mean, that's the concern. It has not been evident yet that that's the case. I think that ultimately those people will still come back, but they're going to come back to a restaurant that's drastically changed.
That's cool. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. So Bernadette, can I turn to you now? So the airport is in contrast to Jeff's businesses, the airport is a very different operation and a huge operation. Firstly, can you sort of tell us the breadth of your responsibilities and share with us how the airport authority has responded in the last 10 weeks or so?
For sure. As the airport authority, we operate the airport as a not-for-profit. We provide service. The customers of ours truly are the airlines that operate from here. And so sort of as the landlord of everyone operating in the space, as soon as kind of in late March, as this all started to come together, our first and foremost goal was to make sure the safety of our staff that were working here, as well as the passengers that were coming through. The closing of the borders was quite shocking. And just the overall impact of flying in general was something that was completely unprecedented for us here at the airport. And so we were just quickly to react to shrinking our overall footprint. As aircraft were grounded, we had to create an aircraft parking plan for those to sit. We were lucky enough that we had some experience from some folks still around that were here for September 11th. So we were able to kind of leverage their experience and knowledge. And all of a sudden we just had a lot less people in this space, but a lot more cleaning that were required. So it was a bit of a shocking time. And of course, everyone is looking to the airport to provide guidance because it was also kind of unknown on exactly what the expectations were as things were changing so rapidly. So we had to work quite quickly, being a 24/7 operations that we are. So our first goal is to shrink the facility. So anyone who's been to the terminal and has been flying since sort of early April, it would look quite different. All of our operations are really centralized to the middle of the facility, kind of the equivalent of what it would have been back in about 1997. Our passenger traffic is down 95%. To kind of put that in perspective for everyone out there. On average, we see about 25,000 people go through the airport every day. Pre-COVID, we didn't even see that in the entire month of April. And our lowest point, I think we had about 225 people travel through departing out of Calgary. So we're pretty hard hit. And as things start to open up and we start to see some changes, it's really that focus on creating a safe environment for the people that work here, but also the people who want to travel.
Cool. And you mentioned about people with experience of 9/11 who help with that. Were you in contact with any other airports? Are you part of a network that that you learned off one another?
For sure. So there's a whole bunch of governing bodies that sort of set out the rules and regulations so that airports, because we're connected, it would be if Calgary did all of these things, but the airports we connect to weren't. We're not going to get the safety of the traveler or the impression to the traveler that air travel is safe. So everyone on the network has to be sort of following the same game plan. So immediately on the slowdown, we were reaching out to the majors in Canada to find out exactly what they were doing. So working with Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, so that we were sort of aligned in our approach in dealing with our air carriers and our customers, and also just getting aligned with the information that was coming from the federal government. There was a lot of unknowns between federal, provincial, and just the legislations that were coming out. So just kind of getting this group mentality around, these are the things within our control, these are the things we're going to do today, and these are some of the lessons learned. We were the first to consolidate our facility for the other airports across Canada. So a lot of them were looking to us for what went well, what didn't go so well, were there some hiccups or surprises or things that we hadn't thought about. So we were able to openly share that across our partners across the country. So that was really, really helpful.
Okay, that's cool. That's good. So Jeff, can I talk to you about the hospitality sector? So you've talked a little bit about, what changes you made to your business and operation when the lockdown first happened. But, one thing that has not changed ever since the lockdown first started is the path forward isn't that clear. You know, there's been talk of spikes and troughs and when the stages of getting back to normality will come about. With that in mind, how do you prepare your businesses and employees for a future which is a little bit uncertain from a timing point of view?
Well, for me, I'm pretty cautious about those sorts of things, and it's not necessarily the case for the entire industry. I wouldn't begrudge a restaurateur for opening the second that they were able to open legally, because we operate on razor thin margins, and it's a very difficult time. We're all definitely losing money, even with the subsidies in place. As months go by, we're putting our own capital in. So it's not a risk that I chose to take because of a couple of reasons. One of them being the safety of the staff and the concerns of the staff. When you're uncertain, there's fear, and that's going to obviously manifest itself in different ways with different people. But just the majority of the staff that I just wanted to make sure that they felt safe coming back. So we didn't open right away. There's a selfish secondary part of that, and I say selfish, but I mean I think it's pragmatic. Is that like what is safe? If it's the absence of fear, opening a restaurant with a bunch of people in gloves and masks does not feel safe to anybody, and I don't want to give that type of service out of my restaurants. People are very, I think that they overestimate how much control they have over their emotions and the decisions that they make in life. And having an experience in a place that is, I guess, not as hospitable as it should be or can be, may affect their decisions down the road, whether they like to believe it or not. So I didn't, and I mean, we're talking to somebody, Bernadette, who works in airports where safety is like number one. And guess what? You feel that as a customer, that safety is the priority and it's not hospitality. And I mean, that's the way that we have decided as a society that we want it. I'm in the hospitality business. Safety is a major concern, but I'm also very concerned about that feeling of safety. Do you know what I mean? That feeling that you have when you go to a dining experience. So I decided to kind of like hold tight. I'm going to open later than most of my contemporaries, I would imagine. It's going to cost me more money in the end, but I think that it'll allow me to give a better dining experience to my guests. I'm banking on it. And it also helps me to, I guess, mitigate any of those super sticky situations with staff members who are feeling unsafe coming back.
And thinking, oh, go on, Bernadette.
I just want to kind of push on that too, that like feeling of safety. When, you know, the groups that we work, the lobbying groups, the industry groups go out to the public and sort of ask how they feel safe. I think that's a big part of it. If we aren't doing the things that are in line with how people feel, what marks safety for them, then they're not going to take part. And so it does have a longer impact. We're already seeing that with the folks that are coming through the airport and choosing to travel. So I think Jeff's on the right track there, that this has a longer kind of mental effect on people when they make their decision.
And thinking about the future, you know, potential multiple lockdowns and, you know, relaxing restrictions and then applying them again. How do you manage that with your business? Are you going to just be incredibly responsive, you know, to the customer, I'm guessing, but how do you manage the prospect of that variability?
Well, again, I think holding on for me, if that was that directed at me, James?
Go on, you go.
I'll let you go first, it's fine.
For me, that's part of the being patient. Literally tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of your space, but it starts at probably that number, is what it costs to close and reopen for any period of time. It's one of the reasons that you're going to see a lot of places doing a lot of renovations and things like that during this closing period, because it's like, I've never had that opportunity. It's been forced upon me. I might as well make some changes around here now, because I don't have the opportunity to close and reopen for a week. It's a massive, massive, massive cost. So for me, waiting was part of that. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to have to open and then close again. And that happened, unfortunately, in our province, where many businesses planned to reopen based on the information that the provincial government was giving them, and they yanked it at the last minute. And it's a public safety concern. So I understand why it was yanked at the last minute, but also need to understand just the devastating impact that has on businesses. They had to replan and reopen and respend all of that money again. I didn't want to go through that. So I was going to wait and make sure that we at least had some stable direction moving forward.
Bernadette?
Yeah, so preparing for kind of the unknown. I think the airport industry as a whole is a bit unique when it comes to this, because we're pretty comfortable working in constantly changing regulations. So we do lean on the regulations that are going to come down, because that's what keeps things consistent between airports and creates that feeling of safety for the traveler. They know that when they go to when they're flying from Calgary to Toronto, they're going to see and feel the same things that tell them that this is safe and it meets a level of standard that they've come to expect. So as we are preparing for these changes like Jeff had mentioned how he was fast tracked this year to kind of go onto that online market. We're seeing some changes in fast track to some technology that we had looked at and was definitely on the horizon, but something like this is sort of pushing us to go there. So we're reducing the number of touch points that a passenger is going to experience coming through the terminal, whether that's checking in at home or the touchless check-in process. Introducing the social distancing, but doing it in a way that if that was to change, get bigger or smaller, that we can quickly make changes without spending a bunch of money. Those sorts of things are really driving how we stay agile with these changes, because it doesn't make sense to just launch into this is the way it is today, do a huge investment, and then tomorrow the new legislation comes out to say, actually, we only need 1 meter, or now it's 6 meters, or whatever it is. So just being really aware of those changes and how quickly it can happen, and making decisions that keep us flexible for it.
Cool, good. Can I move on to sort of customer feedback now? So, we know in the work that we do in the Social Impact Lab, we gather a lot of customer feedback and customer data. But from a business point of view, gathering those opinions and that feedback is only really useful if you do something with it. At each of your businesses or operations, as each of them settle down into sort of a lockdown normal, did your customers engage with you about what their expectations were, and what did you hear from them? Bernadette, can I ask you that first?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, the customers for us really are our airlines or air carriers. And so it was working really closely with them to make sure that we were meeting whatever legislation was available for. So providing the space, increasing the queuing lines, and just really working closely. And the aviation industry is really small, and competition is really stiff out there. But when stuff happens like this, or when you go to SARS or September 11th or the financial crisis in 2008, we do rally together as a community, and we're able to share the information at that time. It's not about the uniform or who's flying what routes. It's really, how do we make the best out of this situation to make sure everybody's getting what they need, and we're creating a safe and efficient operation so our people can get through, our people can work here safely, and passengers can get through safely. So much like that, the community really did rally together in working with our teams to sort of say, these are the things we need, these are the things we're missing or we can't get. There was a huge delay on supply chain when it came to hand sanitizers and dispensers and all of these things. And, we reached out to the airport community, to the spaces that had closed, and we had folks from businesses showing up with their personal cars, dropping off vats of hand sanitizer, knowing that we were still open and we were still an essential service. So we really saw that it wasn't just I need, it was I also have in case you need, which was really eye-opening experience as well.
That's great. That's great. I love it when the community sort of rallies to support. That's a fantastic story. And Jeff, you were out there on the road, delivering and seeing your customers firsthand. Did you get any kind of feedback from them that helped you adapt your offering at that stage?
Yeah, I think initially, to be honest, I was a little more casual than I anticipated that the customer would desire at that point, especially early on. I was surprised at the reaction of how important the protocols of safety were. We learned it super quick, and it was gloves and masks on deliveries, pretty much right off the bat. as it's moved on, like my customer is the general public. So I have a very large pool to draw from. As we've moved forward, there's beginning to be a rift between those who desire extreme safety protocols be in place so that when they visit the restaurants that they can be assured that their safety is the primary concern of the restaurant, to those who want you just to get open, let's get back to normal. And I mean, honestly, I think the answer for my businesses resides somewhere in between. The safest, if you want to be 100% safe, you should do that on your own. And because an environment jammed with people is not safe for you if you fear this disease. I mean, that's the bottom line. On the other side of it, I have to, put measures in place to ensure my customers are acting responsibly in the space. And that's what the government has done. And that's what we plan to do as an industry as well. And to make sure that everybody that does decide to go out is not infringing, on the safety of other customers. So we've had to become kind of police. I mean, I'm not open yet, but I am in contact constantly with people who are. It's a very difficult thing. The rolling out of the regulation changes this weekend was done from our industry's point of view in an incredibly irresponsible and poorly communicated way. I got 5 to 6 emails yesterday saying like, we're good to go, 100% good to go. And it was like, no, we're not. We still have to observe the social distancing restrictions. Most restaurants going to 100% affects them zero. They're not going to be able to add seating, tables, or anything like that. So, it's finding this balance. I'm not going to open a restaurant where when you walk in, it's a safety place. It's, because that's not what we sell. We sell experiences. That's the sort of experience I don't need to pay for. So we're going to do everything in our power, as we always have done as an industry, to make sure that our customers are safe. But we have to find that balance with the other side of the table, which is just making sure that we're still giving a hospitable experience, which is, again, why I've decided to kind of hold off until I'm able to balance those two things.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. We've had a number of questions actually in the question box, and I'm going to ask a couple of those now before I hand over to Monique. So this one is to Bernadette, and this is a question I've heard a number of times from friends and family. So does the airport have a sense of when more airlines will pick up operations?
It's so hard to tell with everything changing. We are constantly waiting on federal ruling. So whether or not the U.S. border is going to open for non-essential travel, that will impact when and if our U.S. carriers return, as well as our international border. The biggest question right now is around the quarantine. With quarantine on either side, what does that mean for the traveling public, that you're adding 2 weeks on either end to actually be able to enjoy your vacation? So there's just really a lot of unknowns right now. We anticipate about 3 to 4 years before we see the travel that we saw pre-pandemic. And a lot of that hinges on just overall public safety, the quarantine side of things, and then inevitably a vaccine that allows people to travel freely. So that's sort of the estimate we're giving. Yeah. Wow.
I didn't expect that. 3 to 4 years. That's a long time. Cool. But thanks for your answer. And Jeff, this one is probably more directed at you. As the support local movement continues to enhance, how are you seeing local business groups supporting each other better through this versus competing?
Well, I'm on the board of the Alberta Hospitality Association, which was started in response to COVID shutdowns, because we didn't feel as a community, as a restaurant, that we were getting adequate representation up to government as well as in the media with the realities of Alberta centric hospitality businesses. A lot of the major associations which represent restaurants represent all restaurants, including, and so they tend to focus their message towards the largest portion of their membership base, which is quick service, very large companies, fast food, those types of things. So the small local guys didn't really have a voice. So we started that along with some other people in the industry here. And what we did was contact a company in Calgary called In Unison, who is a safety company, health and safety. And we developed along with them a reopening plan for all restaurants, which, was an interactive plan that updates with the government regulations as they update. You're able to log in, see the new regulations, see how they impact your business, report any incidences that you may have that are safety related, and then give you best practices, including tools and resources, signage for your restaurants if you can't afford that sort of thing, to have that thing produced for your restaurant, just to all restaurateurs. So that was like a really good way, and that we all kind of came together. And it's funny, my industry tends to get myopic. When you're really busy and things are going a mile a minute, you tend to discuss things less with your peers. This snapped us all right back into communicating with one another rapidly, because that uncertainty of like, what the hell are we going to do next week? Like, what's going on? What's your bank account look like? What does my bank account look like? Are you going to be okay? And that instantly happened, and mostly one-to-one communication. But there was examples like with the Hospitality Association where it was organized and pointed towards this pandemic specifically.
Thank you. Monique, do you want to go now?
Yeah, well, you know what? I was just going to say, I think this is such an interesting and very thought-provoking conversation. And one of the questions that has come through our chat as well is really about, this lens of how do we plan for the unexpected? And, certainly the hospitality industry stepping up, coming together. Jeff, that's a great narrative. And Bernadette, the airports learning from each other. But I'm curious as to, based on this question as well, how do you prepare for the next wave? Has the changes you've planned going to continue to support if we have to do this again? And what have you learned from this situation that you might be able to implement when and if this does happen again? Big question. Jeff, you unmuted first.
Sure. I mean, I don't have, for me, I tend to, in life and in business, try and find a balance between, which I guess what you could call chaos and order. In my business, you may look at it as creativity in business. I'm a business-centric person with a touch of creativity, but I hire creatives, and it's almost exclusively my base of employees, for the most part, are the ones that are in management. So for me, I tend to get out of the way of those creative destructors, the people who don't mind breaking stuff, to have new ideas emerge. And then I tend to take those new ideas and make them structured in a manner, order them in a manner that they can be executable. There's really no way to plan for things of this nature, but you can plan how you're going to react. You may not be able to plan exactly what you're going to do, but you can plan how you're going to react. Again, like with some of the stuff that came out of Proof and Donna Mac, it was not me. These ideas were from my creative managers, the people who are really on the front lines, but their strengths may not necessarily be in the organization of it. So I think it's finding balance between that destructive creativity and then, placing it into a structure which allows you to carry it forward. That's usually, with pandemic or not, kind of how I tend to run my businesses.
Awesome. I'm taking away destructive creativity on that.
Me too. How do we prepare for the next one? Business continuity is a huge part of what we're trying to do here at the airport most days. We really would prefer it to not to be to this extent again. But I think that the lessons learned coming out of this is kind of leaning on what Jeff said, is just letting the people who know what they're doing do what they need to do, right? We adjusted on the fly. We had the right people making decisions, offering recommendations to be able to really react. And a huge part of that was just having people who know what the end game is and what we're trying to do, right? The airport is safe, efficient operations. We're trying to move people, things, and ideas as quickly and safely as possible. And with that in mind, we were able to kind of approach this in how do we do that in this new world? And now as we start to see the other side of it, it's really harnessing that idea, using this as a restart to make sure that if this was to happen again, we've learned from the lessons that maybe we wouldn't do that again, and we can react a lot quicker going forward.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to add a little bit too, if I may, briefly. Like this thing forced us into a lot of that creativity, which I was perhaps ignoring for a very long time because it wasn't necessary. It's taught myself and my business partner a lesson in proactively looking at always keeping fresh ideas at the top of the pile, because frankly we got comfortable. The restaurant industry doesn't make anybody wealthy, well, unless you got a whole bunch of them. But it gets, you can be comfortable, and we were too comfortable in some cases. So completely changing the paradigm forced us to do things that we probably should have been doing a long time ago, and I hope that we will continue to do in the future if things ever get back to normal.
Thanks, Jeff, for that. Oh, Bernadette, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it just triggered for me, like we were joking around the office. If you'd asked me in January if I could work from home, so my staff work 24/7. So like the idea of not coming into the office and seeing them every day was like, no, I could never do that. And yet I did. And now I want to. So, and the organization as a whole has sort of been like, oh, we can do this, and we can change sort of that future of work and the future thought of what work is. And it's really forced us to make some changes that, we're like, oh, we'll get to it, but now we have to. And it's proven that maybe we should have been doing this all along.
Yeah. When we opened today's episode, we talked about the importance of the employees coming back and what back to work programs what they look like. And both of you have spoken to, the safety of your employees, balancing customer expectations with that safety. I read a report that was put out by McKinsey that was all around this concept of the workplace needs what we call a return muscle. And it's this idea of a business being able to absorb uncertainty and to incorporate the lessons that we learn really quickly into our operating models. And, Jeff, you really talked a little bit about that, as it's like this lens of forcing you into the creativity, but your employees are on the front line. And how are you empowering them in order to either make decisions, make recommendations, and to, start to look at, if we did it this way, we might be able to have a different result. Bernadette, do you want to start on that one?
Sure. So because there's a lot of unknowns out there, when we start talking about like social distancing, what is that going to do for the flow of people through the building? We really opened it up to our teams and sort of were like, hey, you guys work here. What are you reading? What are you seeing? What are you wondering why we aren't doing this? So that's where ideas like vending machine PPE comes from, and different ways to set up the queuing so that you have more spacing, so that creative juices kind of start flowing with our people. And for our staff that have been here through the entire thing, who have been getting up every day and coming to work, they have a lot of opinions on, what they experience, what makes them feel safe. And so we're taking that into account as well. And the biggest part is putting together our task force of employees to sort of say, how do we come back to work for everyone else? What does this look like? What can we learn from the lessons of the people who've been here the entire time? Can we look to the folks that are out on the front lines, actually in the passengers' journey, and what are they doing? How do we incorporate that into our everyday work? And how do we continue this work from home with keeping safe, but also keeping our operation going? So it's really about the people and sort of their feedback, because it's that their feeling of safety will build the productivity that we're looking for, and being able to be agile to those needs as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, for us, right from the beginning, and I haven't even been able to bring back a significant amount of workers yet for the restaurants. With the wine store, with Vine Arts, right from the beginning, it was a sit down with every staff member, just trying to suss out their level of comfort, right? We didn't have any particular any people who were particularly worried about it. But if we did, our plan was obviously to try and find a way to keep them financially able and safe at the same time. And that was just our commitment. Although, we had 0 employees come back to us and say, no, I don't feel safe. All of them came back and were like, I'm happy to be working, gets my mind off of this, just put me to work. I don't know. So the employees that I brought back for the restaurant, that's also been the case. And I don't know yet how it will go throughout the entire roster of staff members, although I do plan to bring back every single staff member. It is going to be staged. It is going to be partially dependent on what happens with the government regulations and the government subsidies, because they largely are affecting who I'm able to bring back or who I desire to bring back, honestly, because I do have some people where we've had honest conversations and they're like, listen, I can't come back for 2 days a week because this is pretty easy math. And that's fine. I'm happy to work with those people. On the safety side, for us, it's full caution, like at the restaurants. That's partially to, put some confidence into the guests, but it's also to keep the staff members safe. So, the regulations that the Alberta Hospitality Association and In Unison have put out are like the strictest of strict best practices. And then just conversations with the staff as we move forward with what they're comfortable with will just continue to happen day to day.
And Jeff, as part of that hospitality sector, and this is one of the questions from the audience, is do the businesses that you're seeing have access to PPE and supplies needed in order to maintain safety?
Yeah, we haven't seen. So one of the things when we were considering the reopening was, are we going to be a burden on PPE? Because we seemed to have pretty ready access to it. And it was actually the other end of that spectrum where we were like, are we taking this away from other frontline workers? Like, is this, and we looked into it and, we're not required to use medical grade masks and things like that. So most restaurants have gone with, cloth masks. I haven't seen too many places that are using medical grade. But no, we have not had, and I guess our close relationships with distilleries and things like that, I've not experienced yet, except for maybe like week 1, week 2, an inability to gain any of those sorts of things.
Okay, thanks. I'd love to move into a conversation a bit around community, because what we've seen, and one of the questions was around local, but during the lockdown, we've seen really communities band together to support each other. And Bernadette, I'd love if you could speak a bit about the role that the Calgary Airport plays in supporting our community, our city.
For sure. Normally, we're a huge economic generator for the city. With the downturn and being not for profit and really counting the revenues from the passenger side, that side of our business has sort of gone to sleep. However, we are still an essential service, and there's a whole other side to the airport that I think a lot of the general public don't really consider. So we still had a huge job in this pandemic. Our cargo, we're up 17% over Q1 of last year, just with the cargo operation. So if you think of the delivery of PPE and goods, more people shopping online and ordering to their house, that operation is still going. That greatly affects what we're doing every day. We also have medevac, air charters, folks getting up to work in the camps. All of that stuff is still going on. And so we have a really important role just keeping Calgary connected to the things that they need coming into the city, as well as getting to the places that they do need to go. So it's a huge responsibility, and why we are deemed an essential service, and why we knew we had to focus, get people in, keep people working so that we can continue to serve the Calgary region.
That's great. I'm happy to know that all my Amazon shipments possibly came through the airport.
Likely.
We spent a lot of time talking about, how you've reacted, what you've done with your business. I'd love to get an understanding of what's been positive then from all of this. Jeff, maybe you could answer that for us. A learned positive experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, outside of the forcing us into creativity and things, I think that's across the board. Most of the entrepreneurs in any sector that I speak to have kind of woken up to that, to just how creative and I guess fleet of foot they can be when forced into it. So it gives you that confidence to keep doing that. I think the community aspect, which Bernadette just answered a question on, is obviously that too. I mentioned earlier, like I hadn't spoken to a lot of people that I spoke to as soon as this hit. And it was very good for me to get their stories and resources from people within my immediate community, as well as the business community, to see how they're dealing with this. The more information you have, the better decisions that you can make, hopefully. And I think that there has been a renewal of that kind of coming together. We can support one another. We're not each other's competition all the time. And let's try and make each other better.
Yeah. Bernadette?
Well, same. I think the ability to sort of say, oh, I didn't think we could do that. And we did. So that's a big part of it. But I also think, like, you know, in the state that we were leading up to the pandemic, it was go, go, go. We were about to hit like a monumental, we had just hit 18 million passengers. We were on track to even go further. And we were just growing quite quickly and everything was happening quite fast. And I guess for me personally, the opportunity to kind of pause, reflect, and make adjustments is really the silver lining out of what we're experiencing. We're sort of taking a look at how we do things. Can we do it more efficiently? Can we improve the experience for the passenger while maintaining all of these new social requirements that are likely going to stick around for a long time? And for most people, I think they're looking back going, why didn't we do this all along? Why aren't there thousands of hand sanitizer stations all over the place and these kinds of things? So having that moment to sort of take a breath and take a look at what we are trying to do day in and day out here and make those adjustments so that as we start to spool up and pick up again, it's better. And taking advantage of this opportunity to make sure that when we're back up to 18 million passengers a year, that it's a better experience for everyone.
I'd love to explore that a little bit more, because this idea of creating a better experience, but being able to put time aside to do that. Mm-hmm. How do you plan to prioritize that with your teams when you're back at 18,000 passengers and 100% passenger flow?
Well, it's taking the time now and really setting the stage to make sure that the things that we have in place are going to stand that test of time, right? You know, taking a look at our processes to the passenger journey, working with our other airports worldwide to find out what they've put in place. You know, a lot of European and Asian airports are miles ahead when it comes to technology. Like let's look at that. Let's see how we can fast track that so that we are able to keep up with this new demand for this newer and safer operation, and still have the output we had before.
Mm-hmm. Great. Jeff, I'm curious from your perspective, because I know you talked a lot about creativity, and you know, certainly you and your business partners were status quo, business as usual. Pandemic hits, you pay attention to what's going on around you, you pay attention to what's happening in your community, but you also kept an eye of what was going on around the world. And I'm curious as to whether you're going to continue to do that to see if it can influence some of the decisions you might be making in your business.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that we've tried to do. We like to innovate, but innovation often can happen in a lot of different places. And I mean, again, I tell people all the time, it's like, oh, you're such an innovator with this and that. I'm like, well, someone else innovated it, but I'm a good replicator. So, I mean, and I'll take it, all of that praise when I can get it. But yeah, I think that's important. And while Bernadette was speaking, I was just thinking about how, you know, a couple conversations my business partner, Jesse, and I have had about, you know, making sure that we're not just work, and then vacation is no work. Do you know what I mean? Like, can you just kind of compartmentalize it and put it away? Probably some of the best work that we can get done creatively anyways is when we're in a rested state while working, and that doesn't seem to happen much for us. I jokingly gave James my bio saying I'm a recovering workaholic, but that's actually true. I work way too much, way too many hours. And I think that part of this, if I can echo Bernadette, is that I hope to come out of it with a better understanding of working smart as opposed to, and what's important in my work, as opposed to just showing up at the businesses every day and, you know, trying to make sure that everything's functionally happening well. I have a much higher impact on my business through my people and through creativity, which I can only do if I'm, you know, not stressed to the nines.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I think this is the perfect time then to ask, you know, what does the future look like for businesses, for operations? And Jeff, I know at the beginning we talked a bit about the cocktail boxes, but knowing that, of course, being a retailer as well, hoping that a licensing changes, but you did, you know, create a new business opportunity with the Can Confluence, I think. Are there any other things that you have planned that you're thinking about? And maybe you could speak a little bit to that for some of our guests that joined a bit later.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, I think those canned drinks that we did, we're able to continue to do those, and we want to push those to market. So I just need to do large enough batches that I can get the wholesale price down, that I can actually get them into liquor stores like my own, and hopefully some other major, much larger players. And that will be a secondary stream of income, which will help that business, hopefully forever. So, and that was the idea too, when we were trying to come up with ideas. I didn't want to do too many ideas that weren't going to be replicable post-COVID. And the cocktail boxes were one that we knew we believe we weren't going to be able to continue to do, but we do think that we are going to be able to continue to do the syrups, right? We can sell syrups from the bar. It's not alcoholic. So we're going to move away from the Vaxil bags that were the emergency response and move to bottles, and you know, maybe those end up moving into liquor stores as well. For Donna Mac, like I said, it's a complete change. We're the same quality standards, and but we're going to casualize the space and come up with a more approachable menu. Move forward in that direction. And for the business as a whole, I think Jesse and I are looking to the winners in this, and I think of our businesses, they all won to some degree. But the retail side of the business really won, and you know, we're looking at you know, the stronger parts of the business as the ones that we kind of have to focus our mental attention on moving forward. So we'll see where that takes us, but the conversations are being had for sure.
Well, I look forward to seeing the canned cocktails. Bernadette, right? We're going to go buy some of those.
I know. I was like, canned cocktail sounds great.
I'm all about it. And of course, we've got borders. You know, we've heard the border potentially opening up this month. Any final thoughts around, you know, what the future for the airport might look like for our listeners?
To be completely vague, once it all comes together, if we're doing it right, you shouldn't notice we've done anything at all. And that really is the goal. There are a ton of regulations that guide the safety of a passenger's journey through the airport that most of the public have no idea even exist. They're there. If we get this right, the same will be true. It'll be a safer, more cleaner operation for folks to get through. And as I said, if we do it right, you won't even see it, feel it, or know it's happening. Just get that sense of safety and consistency between the airports.
Fantastic. That's great. On that note, I want to thank both Bernadette Kirk and Jeff Jamieson for leading boldly, truly in your organizations, and for supporting community and for maintaining creativity. For our audience, just a reminder that we do record this session and it'll be available on YouTube. And if you'd like to continue to engage with us on topics such as this and many others, you can do so by following us on LinkedIn, of course, Instagram and Facebook. And we also have an open innovation platform called Open City. Our next episode is on June 24th, where we're going to be exploring art in a time of crisis and recovery. And thank you to our technical team today, Vicky Laszlo and Paige Ross. Thank you for joining us. Be safe and stay healthy.